I'm Peggy Anderson, 62 years old, and after 8 years of barely seeing my daughter Megan, I was so excited when she finally invited me to visit for my granddaughter's 10th birthday. My heart sank when she led me past two beautiful guest bedrooms where her in-laws were staying, and up to a dusty, spider-filled attic with a cot. I smiled through my tears that night, clutching the lottery ticket worth $47 million that I'd been keeping secret. I never planned on revenge, just clarity about what really matters in life. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to smile through disrespect while knowing your true worth runs much deeper than others can see. The small town of Camden, Maine had been my home for over 40 years. It was where I'd raised my daughter Megan, where I'd spent my entire career as a nurse at the local hospital, and where I'd said goodbye to my beloved husband Edward when cancer took him 8 years ago. Our modest, two-bedroom Cape Cod-style house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees that turned magnificent shades of red and gold every fall. After Edward passed, I continued working at the hospital only recently, cutting back to part-time at age 62. Retirement wasn't financially possible yet, despite decades of careful saving. Edward's medical bills had drained much of our nest egg, even with insurance. But I didn't mind the work. Nursing had always been more than a paycheck to me, it was a calling. "You should move to a retirement community, Peggy," my colleague Janet often suggested. "Wouldn't you like someone else to shovel the snow for once? And miss my morning cardio workout?" I'd joke in response. The truth was, I loved my little house with its creaky floors and the garden Edward and I had tended together. Every corner held memories I wasn't ready to leave behind. Besides, where would I go? My only child, Megan, had made it clear she had no room in her life for me. It hadn't always been that way. Megan was a bright, loving child, though perhaps a bit too conscious of what others thought. She'd been embarrassed by our modest means, even in high school, coveting the designer clothes and fancy vacations her wealthier friends enjoyed. "Why can't we go to Florida for spring break like everyone else?" She'd complain while I explained once again that a nurse's salary and her father's income as a high school science teacher could only stretch so far. College changed her. She'd received a partial scholarship to Boston University, not enough to cover everything, but Edward and I scraped together the rest, taking second jobs and a second mortgage on the house. We were so proud when she graduated and landed a position at a prestigious event planning company that catered to Boston's elite. That's where she met Thomas Wilson, the son of a banking executive and heir to old money. Handsome, polished, and 12 years her senior, he swept Megan off her feet. I still remember her phone call announcing their engagement after just 6 months of dating. "He's perfect, Mom," she gushed. "His family has a summer house on Nantucket and a ski lodge in Vermont. Can you believe it?" I had concerns about the whirlwind romance, but Edward counseled patience. "Let her find her own way," he'd said. "She's always wanted more than we could give her. Maybe this is her chance at happiness." The wedding was lavish, held at the Wilsons' Country Club in Boston. I felt out of place among the pearls and designer suits in my department store dress that Megan had reluctantly approved. Edward was too sick to attend. The cancer had returned aggressively, and I sat alone at a table with distant cousins who barely acknowledged me. After that, the visits became rare. Megan and Thomas bought a grand colonial in Beacon Hill. They had a daughter, Emma, whom I'd met only twice as an infant. Megan always had excuses for why I couldn't visit renovations, their busy social calendar. Thomas's work commitments. When Edward died, Megan flew in for the funeral and left the same day. "Thomas has an important dinner," she explained while checking her watch. I noticed she'd removed her wedding ring before the service, replacing it with Edward's mother's simple band. "This looks more appropriate for a funeral," she'd said when I noticed the switch. The years passed, occasional phone calls, Christmas cards with professional family photos, Megan, Thomas, and Emma looking perfect in coordinated outfits, always in exotic locations. No invitations to visit. Until 3 weeks ago, when Megan called unexpectedly. "Emma's turning 10 next weekend," she said without preamble. "She's been asking about you. Would you like to come for a visit? Stay for a week, maybe?" I nearly dropped the phone in surprise. "I'd love to, sweetheart. Are you sure it's a good time?" "Of course," she replied, though something in her voice sounded strained. Emma should know her grandmother better. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table stunned and hopeful. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe Megan was finally ready to welcome me back into her life. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that my life had already changed dramatically 3 days earlier. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd stopped for gas on my way home from a shift at the hospital. After paying, I had $2 in change. On impulse, I bought a lottery ticket from the machine near the register. "Waste of money," I could hear Edward saying fondly. He'd always teased me about my occasional lottery tickets, calling them my retirement plan. That night, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, I remembered the ticket and checked the numbers online. The first number matched, then the second. By the fifth number, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely read the screen. All 6 numbers matched. $47 million. After taxes, about $30 million. I sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. But there it was. In black and white, I'd won the Maine State Lottery jackpot. My first call was to my closest friend Irene, who'd run the local pharmacy for 30 years. "Don't tell a soul," she advised after her initial scream of excitement. "Get a lawyer before you claim it, and for God's sake, put that ticket somewhere safe." I followed her advice. The ticket went into a waterproof pouch that I kept in my bra day and night. I consulted a financial advisor in Portland who specialized in sudden wealth. He helped me create a plan for claiming the money after my visit to Megan's. The Lottery Commission had agreed to delay the public announcement at my request. For now, no one would know, not even my daughter. Especially not my daughter. I wanted to see her true self first, not the version that might emerge if she knew her mother was suddenly wealthy. As my bus pulled into Boston's South Station, I clutched my old floral suitcase and felt the lottery ticket safely nestled against my heart. I was a woman of modest means, going to visit her estranged daughter at least for 1 more week. The cab dropped me off in front of a stately brick colonial with manicured hedges and a gleaming black door adorned with a brass knocker. The house was even grander than it appeared in the Christmas photos, 3 stories tall with dormer windows and a circular driveway where an expensive SUV and a sports car were parked. I smoothed down my best blouse, a blue cotton button-up I'd ironed carefully, and adjusted my simple gold cross necklace, a gift from Edward on our 25th anniversary. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. The door swung open to reveal my granddaughter, Emma. She had Megan's dark hair and my own blue eyes. She looked at me uncertainly. "Emma," I said warmly, "I'm your grandmother Peggy. You've grown so much since I last saw you." Before she could respond, Megan appeared behind her, elegant in tailored slacks and a silk blouse. "Mom," she said, giving me a quick hug that barely made contact. "You made it. Come in." I followed them into a marble-floored foyer with a crystal chandelier overhead. The house smelled of furniture polish and expensive candles, nothing like the homey scent of baking bread and garden flowers that had filled our little house in Camden. Thomas appeared from what looked like a home office, tall and handsome, in casual designer clothes that probably cost more than a month of my salary. "Peggy," he said with a practiced smile, briefly clasping my hand, "welcome to our home." "Thank you for having me," I replied sincerely. "Your house is beautiful." "We just finished a complete renovation," Megan said, gesturing to the open-concept living area with its pristine white furniture and abstract art. The interior designer is the same one who did the Harris's place in the Hamptons. I nodded as if this meant something to me. Where are Grandma and Grandpa? Emma asked, looking past me toward the door. Your other grandparents are resting upstairs, sweetie, Thomas answered. They had a long flight from Palm Beach this morning. My heart sank. Megan hadn't mentioned that her in-laws would be visiting at the same time. I'd met Richard and Eleanor Wilson only twice at the wedding and at Edward's funeral, and both encounters had been distinctly uncomfortable. Eleanor had surveyed our modest church reception with barely disguised disdain, while Richard had made pointed comments about the quaintness of small-town life. I didn't realize Richard and Eleanor would be here too, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Yes, they come for all of Emma's birthdays, Megan replied, a slight edge to her voice. They're very involved grandparents. The unspoken comparison hung in the air between us. Unlike you, her eyes seemed to say. Let me show you where you'll be staying, Megan continued briskly. Emma, go tell Sophia we need tea in the living room. I followed Megan up a sweeping staircase to the second floor, where she pointed out the primary bedroom suite, Emma's room with its canopy bed and 2 elegantly appointed guest rooms. Richard and Eleanor are in these rooms, she explained, gesturing to the guest suites. They each prefer their own space. We continued up a narrower staircase to the 3rd floor. The temperature rose noticeably as we climbed, and the plush carpet of the 2nd floor gave way to bare wooden boards. Megan opened a door at the end of the hallway, revealing a small space tucked under the eaves. Dust motes danced in a shaft of sunlight from a single dormer window. A narrow cot had been set up with what looked like old bedding. Cardboard boxes lined one wall, and a dress form draped with fabric stood in the corner. We use this as a storage space usually, Megan said, not quite meeting my eyes. But we've made it up for you. The bathroom is down the hall. I'm sorry it's not more comfortable, but with Richard and Eleanor here. It's fine, dear, I said automatically, though my heart was crumbling. I don't need much. Bosmez Thomas need their comfort, she said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her blouse. They're used to certain standards. You understand. I did understand. I understood that in my daughter's eyes I didn't deserve the same consideration as her wealthy in-laws. I understood that I was an inconvenience, an embarrassment, to be tucked away out of sight. Dinner is at 7, Megan continued. Richard and Eleanor like to dress for dinner, so if you have anything appropriate. Her eyes flicked over my simple clothes with a hint of concern. I'm sure I can find something suitable, I assured her, though I knew the contents of my suitcase. My best slacks, a few modest blouses, and a single dress for Emma's party would fall far short of the Wilson standards. After Megan left, I sat on the edge of the cot, feeling its springs creak beneath me. The room was hot and stuffy, with no air conditioning like the rest of the house clearly had. Spiderwebs clung to the rafters, and a thin film of dust covered everything. I allowed myself exactly 1 minute of tears. Then, with the practicality that had carried me through nursing school, raising a child as a working mother, and losing my husband, I got to work. I found cleaning supplies in the small adjoining bathroom and spent the next hour making the attic room as habitable as possible. As I worked, I thought about the lottery ticket securely hidden in my bra. $30 million. Enough to buy this entire house many times over. Enough to never worry about money again. But money wasn't what I missed most in life. It was the respect and love of my only child. As I hung my few clothes on a rickety coat rack in the corner, I wondered if all the money in the world could buy that back. I descended the stairs at 10 minutes to 7, wearing my navy blue dress with a cardigan and the pearl earrings Edward had given me for our 30th anniversary. I'd done my best with my appearance, though I knew I couldn't compare to the designer outfits Megan and the Wilsons would be wearing. Voices drifted from the formal dining room, rich, cultured tones punctuated by occasional laughter. I paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. A long mahogany table gleamed under the light of another crystal chandelier. Fine china and silver caught the light alongside crystal wine glasses and elaborate floral centerpieces. Richard and Eleanor Wilson sat on one side of the table looking exactly as I remembered them. Richard, tall and distinguished with silver hair, Eleanor petite and immaculately preserved her blonde hair, styled in an elegant bob. Thomas sat at the head of the table with Emma beside him. Megan was giving instructions to a uniformed woman who must be their housekeeper or cook. It was Eleanor who noticed me first, her perfectly arched eyebrows rising slightly. "Ah, Margaret has joined us," she said, using my full name despite having been corrected multiple times over the years. "It's Peggy, actually," I said with a polite smile, stepping into the room. "Good evening, everyone. The house looks lovely, Megan." "Thank you," Megan replied, gesturing to an empty chair at the far end of the table across from Emma. "Please sit. Sophia is just bringing out the first course." As I took my seat, Richard raised his wine glass in a gesture that might have been a greeting or simply adjusting his drink. "How was your trip from— where is it you live again?" "Camden, Maine," I answered. "It was fine, thank you. The bus was quite comfortable." "The bus?" Eleanor repeated as if I'd said I'd arrived by horse and buggy. "How quaint. We just flew in from Palm Beach this morning. The flight was dreadful, so much turbulence. Wasn't it, Richard?" "Intolerable," Richard agreed. "I've told Thomas he should look into fractional jet ownership. Commercial flights are becoming impossible, even first class." I nodded politely, unsure how to respond to concerns so far removed from my own reality. Sophia, the housekeeper, began serving an appetizer of scallops on a bed of something green and frothy. "Mom still works as a nurse," Megan interjected, perhaps feeling some need to explain my presence. "Part-time now, right?" "That's right," I confirmed. 3 days a week at Camden General. I've been there 35 years now." "Remarkable," Eleanor murmured in a tone that suggested she found it anything but. "To work at that age." I was about to point out that at 62 I was younger than both her and Richard, who appeared to be in their 70s, but thought better of it. "Nursing is such important work," Thomas said smoothly, clearly trying to be diplomatic. "Though it must be exhausting dealing with ill people all the time." "It has its challenges," I acknowledged, "but it's rewarding. I've always found meaning in helping others." "Meaning doesn't pay the bills, though, does it?" Richard chuckled. "What's the retirement plan for nurses these days? Adequate, I hope." Before I could answer, Emma piped up. "What's a nurse do exactly? Do you give shots?" I smiled at my granddaughter, grateful for her innocent question. "Sometimes, but mostly I help people when they're sick or injured. I take their vital signs, that's temperature and blood pressure, and help doctors figure out what's wrong. I also help patients understand how to take care of themselves." "Mom was head nurse in the pediatric ward for 15 years, Megan added, surprising me with this accurate detail from my career. "That must be why you're so good with children," Eleanor said with a thin smile. "Richard and I prefer to interact with Emma now that she's older and more substantial in her conversation." The meal progressed with similar uncomfortable exchanges. Richard dominated the conversation with stories about their social connections in Palm Beach and Thomas's childhood accomplishments. Eleanor made occasional comments about the decor or food, often with subtle criticisms disguised as suggestions. Megan seemed tense, watching her in-laws carefully and jumping to agree with their every opinion. I tried to engage with Emma, asking about school and her interests, but she seemed shy and reserved, answering in monosyllables while glancing at her grandparents, as if seeking approval. "Emma attends Grayson Academy," Thomas announced when I asked about her education. "The most prestigious private school in Boston. They're very selective." "She's doing well in most subjects," Megan added quickly, "though her art teacher thinks she spends too much time on details instead of expressing herself boldly." "That comes from Richard's side," Eleanor declared. The Wilsons have always been meticulous. Perfectionists, really. I nodded, wondering if anyone had ever asked Emma what she thought about her own artwork. After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. I perched on the edge of an uncomfortable but clearly expensive armchair, feeling increasingly invisible as the conversation swirled around topics entirely unfamiliar to me. Country club politics, the best plastic surgeons in Boston, Thomas's latest business acquisition. When I tried to contribute a small anecdote about a community garden project in Camden, Eleanor cut me off mid-sentence to ask Megan about a mutual acquaintance's divorce. By 9:30, fatigue and emotional exhaustion were catching up with me. The time difference from Maine was minimal, but the tension of the evening had drained me. "I think I'll turn in if you don't mind," I said during a lull in conversation. "It's been a long day." "Of course," Megan replied, looking almost relieved. "Emma, say good night to your grandmother." Emma dutifully came over and allowed me to hug her stiffly. "Good night, Grandma Peggy," she said, the formality breaking my heart a little. "Sweet dreams, Emma," I replied. "I'm looking forward to spending time with you tomorrow." As I climbed the 2 flights of stairs to the attic room, I could hear the conversation resume behind me, flowing more easily without my presence. The attic was stifling, having baked under the summer sun all day. I opened the small window as far as it would go, which wasn't far. The sheets on the cot were thin and scratchy against my skin as I lay down, staring at the shadows on the slanted ceiling. From below, I could hear faint laughter, the clink of glasses, the sounds of a family I wasn't really part of. I reached into my nightgown and pulled out the waterproof pouch containing my lottery ticket. In the dim light, I could just make out the numbers that had changed my future. What would Edward say if he could see me now, relegated to the attic while our daughter entertained her wealthy in-laws in luxury below? Would he still counsel patience and understanding? I tucked the ticket away safely and closed my eyes, willing sleep to come and give me respite from the day's disappointments. Tomorrow, I promised myself. Tomorrow I would try harder to connect with Emma, to understand the woman Megan had become, to find some way to bridge the chasm between us. But as I drifted off in the hot, dusty attic, a small, honest part of me wondered if that chasm might be too wide to cross. The next morning I woke early, my body conditioned by years of pre-dawn hospital shifts. Sunlight was just beginning to filter through the small attic window, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. I dressed quickly in slacks and a light blouse, hoping to have some quiet time in the kitchen before the rest of the household stirred. To my surprise, the kitchen was already occupied when I made my way downstairs. An older woman with salt and pepper hair, pulled into a neat bun, was kneading dough at the counter. She looked up as I entered, offering a warm smile that contrasted sharply with the reception I'd received the previous evening. "You must be Mrs. Anderson," she said, wiping flour from her hands. "I'm Martha Johnson. I do the cooking and help Sophia with the housekeeping." "Please call me Peggy," I said, immediately warming to her straightforward manner. "And it's just Ms. now. My husband passed several years ago." "I'm sorry to hear that," Martha replied with genuine sympathy. "Coffee's fresh if you'd like some. The family usually doesn't come down until 8 or later." I gratefully accepted a mug of coffee and sat at the kitchen island watching as Martha expertly shaped the dough into dinner rolls. "You're very skilled," I observed. "My rolls never turn out that uniform." Martha chuckled. 30 years of practice. I worked as a pastry chef before I started with the Wilsons. Needed something less demanding as I got older." She gave me an appraising look. "Megan mentioned you're a nurse." "Yes, going on 35 years now," I replied, pleased that Megan had spoken of me at all. "Noble profession." Martha nodded approvingly. "My sister was a nurse, hardest working person I ever knew." We chatted companionably as Martha continued her morning preparations. I learned she'd been with the Wilsons for 5 years, coming in daily except Sundays. She lived in a modest apartment in Dorchester and had 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren of her own. "Emma's a special girl," Martha said as she sliced fruit for breakfast. "Reminds me of my youngest granddaughter. Thoughtful. Notices things others miss." "I've barely had a chance to get to know her," I admitted. "This is only my 3rd time seeing her since she was a baby." Martha's eyebrows rose, but she made no comment, instead handing me a bowl of strawberries to wash. It felt good to be useful, to have my hands busy with a simple task. As we worked side by side, I felt more comfortable than I had since arriving at the house. Our peaceful interlude was interrupted by the sound of heels clicking on the hardwood floors. Megan appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a cream-colored dress and pearls, her dark hair perfectly styled. "Oh, Mom, you're up early," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "You don't need to help Martha, you're a guest." "I don't mind," I replied. "Martha and I were just getting acquainted." Martha smoothly took the bowl of strawberries from me. "Mrs. Wilson, will Mr. and Mrs. Parker be joining for breakfast, or shall I send trays to their rooms?" "Mother Parker requested a tray in her room, grapefruit dry toast and tea," Megan answered. "Father Parker will come down. He has a golf game at 10 with Thomas." She turned to me, a slight frown creasing her forehead. "Mom, we have plans today. Mother Parker, Emma, and I are going shopping for Emma's birthday outfit, then lunch at the Boston Ladies Club. I'm afraid you wouldn't enjoy it." "Oh," I said, unable to hide my disappointment. "I was hoping to spend some time with Emma today." "Perhaps tomorrow," Megan said vaguely. "You'll be comfortable here. Martha can show you where everything is if you need anything." Before I could respond, Emma came bouncing into the kitchen, still in pajamas featuring cartoon characters I didn't recognize. "Morning, Grandma Peggy," she said with more animation than she'd shown the previous evening. "Are you coming shopping with us today?" "I'm afraid not, sweetie," I answered, catching the warning glance Megan shot her daughter. "Your grandmother will be staying here," Megan said firmly. "Grandma Eleanor has appointments at all the best boutiques for you." Emma's face fell slightly. "But I wanted to show Grandma Peggy my school project. It's about family trees." "Another time," Megan insisted. "Go get dressed now. Grandma Eleanor doesn't like to be kept waiting." As Emma reluctantly left the kitchen, I felt Martha's sympathetic glance. I gave her a small smile, trying to convey that I was fine, though inside I was anything but. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of polite exclusion. Richard and Thomas departed for their golf game, while Eleanor emerged from her room looking immaculate in designer clothes and significant jewelry. She barely acknowledged my presence as Megan ushered her and a now-dressed Emma out the door. "We won't be back until dinner," Megan called over her shoulder. "Thomas's assistant left some work magazines in the study if you get bored." And just like that, I was alone in my daughter's grand house, as out of place as a dandelion in a rose garden. Martha, bless her, seemed to sense my dejection. "I've got some baking to do for Emma's birthday party," she said casually. "Could use an extra pair of hands if you're not busy." I gratefully accepted her invitation, and we spent several hours in the kitchen, making cookies and a practice run of petit four for the party. Martha shared stories about her grandchildren while I told her about my work at the hospital. "Seems to me," Martha observed as we frosted miniature cakes, "that some folks forget what really matters in life." I looked up, catching her knowing expression. "What do you mean?" "Just that all this—" She gestured around the pristine kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. "Doesn't mean much if there's no love in it." "They seem happy enough," I said, trying to be fair to Megan and Thomas. Martha made a non-committal sound. "Appearances can be deceiving. I've worked for many wealthy families over the years. The ones with the biggest houses often have the smallest hearts." I was saved from having to respond by the ringing of a phone somewhere in the house. "That'll be the landline in the study," Martha said. The family all use cell phones, but some business associates still call that number. I went to answer it, navigating through the formal dining room to the study, a masculine space with leather furniture and dark wood bookshelves. The phone sat on an imposing desk. Wilson Residence. I answered, feeling strange speaking for a household that wasn't mine. This is Beacon Academy calling for Mrs. Wilson regarding Emma, a professional female voice replied. I'm sorry she's not available right now. This is Emma's grandmother. Can I take a message? Oh, well, I'm calling because Emma's been selected for a special science program this summer. We need the forms returned by next week, and we haven't heard back from Mrs. Wilson. It's a wonderful opportunity. Only 10 students were chosen. That sounds impressive, I said, genuinely pleased for my granddaughter. I'll make sure to tell my daughter as soon as she returns. After taking down the details, I hung up feeling a surge of pride for Emma. A special science program, she must have inherited Edward's aptitude for the subject. He would have been thrilled. I returned to the kitchen to find Martha putting the finishing touches on a batch of cookies. Everything okay? She asked. Emma's been selected for a special science program, I told her. Apparently, it's quite an honor. Martha smiled knowingly. That child has a good head on her shoulders, spends hours reading in the library when her parents are busy with their social obligations. The comment stung, reminding me how little I knew about my own granddaughter's life and interests. What else had I missed by being kept at arm's length all these years? The afternoon wore on. Martha left at 3, having prepared dinner and set it ready to be served later. I found myself wandering through the large house feeling like an intruder in my daughter's life. In the formal living room, I paused to examine the family photos displayed on a side table. Professional portraits showed Megan Thomas and Emma at various ages and in various picturesque locations. There were photos of the Parkers, Richard and Eleanor, at what appeared to be charity galas and country club events. But there were no photos of me, no pictures of Edward, no evidence that Megan had a life before Thomas, or that Emma had another set of grandparents. I continued my exploration, eventually finding myself at Emma's bedroom door, which stood slightly ajar. I hesitated, not wanting to invade her privacy, but curious about my granddaughter's personal space. The room was larger than my entire bedroom at home, painted a soft purple with white furniture. Shelves held books, trophies, and a collection of science-related toys, microscopes, crystal growing kits, and a small telescope. On her desk sat a project board labeled My Family Tree. I moved closer, scanning the carefully arranged photos and notes. There, to my surprise, was a small photo of Edward and me at Megan's college graduation. The caption read, Maternal grandparents, Edward Anderson deceased and Margaret Anderson. At least she knew we existed. A small composition book lay open beside the project. Emma's neat handwriting filled the page, questions for Grandma Peggy. The list included items like, what was Mom like as a kid? And did Grandpa Edward like science too? And why don't you visit more often? That last question pierced my heart. Did Emma think I stayed away by choice? I carefully backed out of the room, closing the door as I'd found it. My emotions were a tangle of sadness, anger, and renewed determination to connect with my granddaughter during this visit, regardless of Megan's apparent reluctance. Back in the kitchen, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the island contemplating my situation. The lottery ticket sat heavy against my chest, a secret that could change everything or nothing that truly mattered. Money might buy a grand house and designer clothes, but it couldn't purchase genuine connection or respect. Those had to be earned or freely given out of love. As I sipped my tea, I made a decision. I wouldn't reveal my lottery win during this visit. I wanted to see Megan Thomas and the Parkers as they truly were, not as they might present themselves to a suddenly wealthy relative. And perhaps more importantly, I wanted Emma to know me not as a potential source of financial advantage, but as the grandmother who cared enough to fly halfway across the country just to celebrate her birthday. When the front door opened hours later and voices filled the entryway, I straightened my shoulders and prepared to face another evening of subtle exclusion with as much grace as I could muster. After all, I reminded myself I may be sleeping in an attic, but I was a woman of value and dignity with or without $47 million. As the shopping party returned home, I could hear Eleanor's cultured voice complaining about the service at some boutique, while Megan made soothing noises of agreement. Emma burst into the kitchen ahead of them, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Grandma Peggy, look what Grandma Eleanor bought me." She twirled, showing off a frilly pink dress that looked uncomfortable and far too mature for a 10-year-old. "That's very fancy," I managed, trying to sound enthusiastic. "It cost more than all my other dresses combined," Emma confided in a whisper. "Grandma Eleanor says a girl needs to learn about quality early." Before I could respond, Eleanor and Megan swept into the kitchen, arms laden with shopping bags bearing designer logos. "Emma, don't bother your grandmother," Eleanor instructed. "Go hang up your new clothes properly." "She's not bothering me at all," I said quickly. "I'd love to hear about your day, Emma." "Later, perhaps," Eleanor interjected smoothly. "Emma needs to practice piano before dinner. The Simmons Whites will be at her party, and their daughter plays at competition level." Emma's shoulders slumped slightly, but she obediently took her bags and headed upstairs. "Successful shopping trip?" I asked Megan, trying to maintain a connection. "Very," she replied, though she looked tired beneath her perfect makeup. "Mother Parker knows all the best boutiques." She glanced at her watch. "Dinner's at 7 again. Thomas and Father Parker should be back from golf soon." With that, she followed Eleanor upstairs, leaving me alone once more. Dinner that evening followed the same pattern as the night before. Richard dominated the conversation with stories about his golf game and business connections. Eleanor made subtle comments designed to establish her superior taste and social standing. Thomas nodded and agreed with his parents, while Megan seemed perpetually tense, watching their reactions to everything. I tried to engage Emma in conversation, asking about her school and interests, but each attempt was smoothly interrupted by one of the adults usually directing the conversation back to themselves. "Emma's science teacher says she shows remarkable aptitude." I managed to interject during a rare lull. "I hear she's been selected for a special summer program." 4 pairs of eyes turned to me in surprise. "How did you hear about that?" Megan asked sharply. "The school called earlier. I took a message," I explained. "Science program?" Eleanor wrinkled her nose slightly. "Surely Emma would prefer the summer arts camp at the country club. All the right families send their daughters there." "But I want to go to the science program," Emma said softly, looking down at her plate. "I already told Mom." Megan looked uncomfortable. "We haven't made a decision yet, Emma. There are social considerations to take into account." "My father was a science teacher," I reminded everyone gently. "Emma might have inherited his aptitude. He would have been very proud." "Yes, well," Richard cleared his throat. "While basic education is important in our circles, it's the social connections that truly matter for advancement. The country club program introduces girls to the right sort of peers." I bit my tongue to keep from responding that in my circles intelligence and hard work mattered more than who your parents played golf with. "Maybe Emma would enjoy both," I suggested instead. "The science program sounds like it's only a few weeks." "Mom, we've got this handled," Megan said tersely. "Emma's education is something Thomas and I take very seriously." The message was clear. My input was neither needed nor wanted. After dinner, Emma was sent upstairs to finish homework, while the adults retired to the living room for drinks. I excused myself, claiming fatigue, and no one protested my departure. Instead of going directly to my attic room, I paused at Emma's door, which was ajar. She sat at her desk, not doing homework, but adding to her family tree project. I knocked gently. "May I come in?" Emma looked up, her face brightening. "Grandma Peggy." "Yes, please come in. I wanted to show you my project." I entered and sat on the edge of her bed as she eagerly explained her family tree, pointing out various relatives on both sides. When she came to Edward's picture, she hesitated. "I don't remember Grandpa Edward at all," she said sadly. "Mom doesn't talk about him much." "He would have adored you," I told her, my heart aching. "He was a high school science teacher for 35 years. Brilliant man, but so humble and kind. He could explain complex ideas in ways that made them simple." Emma's eyes widened with interest. "Really, I love science, especially biology and chemistry." "Just like your grandfather," I smiled. "He used to do experiments with your mother in our kitchen, simple things like making crystals or studying how plants grow toward light." "Mom did science experiments." Emma sounded incredulous, as if she couldn't imagine her perfectly put-together mother enjoying something so practical. "Oh, yes, she was quite good at it too. Won the school science fair 3 years in a row." We talked for nearly an hour, with Emma asking questions about her mother's childhood, her grandfather, and the small town where I lived. I showed her photos on my phone, my garden, the hospital where I worked, the rocky Maine coastline near my home. "It looks so pretty there," Emma said wistfully. "Not fancy like Boston, but real." "It is real," I agreed. "And peaceful. Your grandfather and I loved walking on the beach looking for shells and sea glass." "I've never collected sea glass," Emma admitted. "Mother Parker says beaches are only good for showing off new swimwear and networking." I had to stifle a laugh at this very Eleanor-like pronouncement. Our conversation was interrupted by Megan appearing at the doorway, her expression tightening when she saw us together. "Emma, it's past your bedtime," she said firmly. "You need your rest for tomorrow's party preparations." "But Mom, Grandma Peggy was telling me about when you were my age," Emma protested. "Did you really win the science fair 3 years in a row?" A fleeting expression crossed Megan's face, something between nostalgia and discomfort. "That was a long time ago," she said dismissively. "Say goodnight to your grandmother now." I hugged Emma, whispering that we'd talk more tomorrow, and left the room with a polite nod to Megan. As I climbed the stairs to my attic room, I could hear their voices from Emma's bedroom. "Mom, why don't we ever visit Grandma Peggy in Maine?" "It's complicated, Emma. Our lives are here now." "But she seems nice, and she knows so much about science." "That's enough, Emma. Some things you're too young to understand." I reached my hot, dusty attic room and sat heavily on the cot. What exactly was I failing to understand? That my daughter was ashamed of her humble origins, that she preferred her in-laws' world of wealth and status to the values her father and I had tried to instill. I pulled out my phone and called Irene, needing to hear a friendly voice. "How's the grand estate?" she asked after I'd filled her in on the day's events. "Exactly what you'd expect." I sighed. "All surface, no substance. Megan is different. She's so concerned with impressing her in-laws that she barely seems like herself anymore." "And they don't know about your lottery win," Irene confirmed. "No, and I'm not telling them. Not yet, anyway. I want to see who they really are first." Irene was quiet for a moment. "Peggy, maybe you should just come home. Why put yourself through this?" I considered her suggestion. It would be easier to leave to retreat to the comfort and respect I enjoyed in Camden, but something held me back. "I need to try Irene, for Emma's sake, if nothing else. And maybe Megan isn't completely lost to me. There are moments when I see glimpses of the daughter I raised." "Just don't let them hurt you more than they already have," Irene cautioned. "You deserve better than an attic room and cold shoulders." After we hung up, I stood by the small window looking out at the manicured garden below. In the soft evening light, I could see a small figure sitting on a stone bench. Emma, still in her day clothes, apparently having snuck back outside after being sent to bed. She looked small and lonely among the formal hedges and statuary. I watched as she picked up what appeared to be a notebook and wrote something, her face serious in concentration. In that moment, I made a decision. Whatever happened during the rest of this visit, I would find a way to maintain a relationship with my granddaughter. She deserved to know there was more to life than social climbing and appearances. She deserved to know her heritage, all of it, not just the polished version approved by the Parkers. As for Megan, I would keep trying to reach the daughter I knew was still in there somewhere beneath the designer clothes and social anxieties, but I wouldn't beg for her approval or acceptance. I had my own worth, my own dignity, and soon I would have the financial means to live exactly as I chose. Not that money would fix the broken relationships, but it would certainly level the playing field in terms of perceived status. I climbed into the uncomfortable cot, feeling the springs dig into my back. Just a few more days, I told myself. A few more days of observation and patience before decisions would need to be made. One thing was becoming increasingly clear, though the true poverty in this house had nothing to do with money. The next morning dawned bright and hot, promising another sweltering day in the attic room. I rose early again and made my way down to the kitchen, where Martha was already preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Peggy," she greeted me warmly. "Sleep well." "As well as can be expected in an oven," I replied with a small smile, accepting the coffee she offered. "Those third-floor rooms are brutal in summer," Martha agreed. The Wilsons had central air conditioning installed everywhere except up there. Never saw the need since it's just storage space. "And the occasional unwanted guest," I added wryly. Martha gave me a sympathetic look. "If it helps, Emma was asking about you this morning before she left for her swimming lesson." "She's gone already." I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Mr. Parker takes her to the country club pool every Saturday morning," Martha explained. "They left about 30 minutes ago. Mrs. Parker and your daughter are at their weekly salon appointments. Mr. Wilson is in his study on business calls." So once again, I would spend the day essentially alone in a house full of people who had no time for me. "Emma's birthday party is tomorrow afternoon." Martha continued efficiently chopping vegetables for lunch preparations. "It's going to be quite the affair. 20 children plus parents catering a professional photographer and a magician." "Sounds elaborate for a 10-year-old, I observed. "The Wilsons don't do anything by halves," Martha replied. "Last year they had a petting zoo set up in the backyard. Poor gardener nearly had a heart attack over his prize roses." I laughed, grateful for Martha's friendly conversation. "What does Emma think of all this?" Martha hesitated. "Between us, I think she finds it overwhelming. She's a quiet child, more interested in her books and science experiments than being the center of attention." "Just like her grandfather," I murmured. Edward had been the same way, brilliant but unassuming happiest, when working on a project in his study or tending his vegetable garden. Martha and I spent the morning in companionable activity, preparing food for the next day's party. She taught me how to make delicate sugar decorations for the petit fours, while I shared my recipe for the oatmeal cookies Edward had loved. "These are delicious," Martha declared after sampling one. "Simple but perfect. I'm adding these to my regular rotation." Around 11, Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking surprised to find me there. "Peggy," he nodded. "I didn't realize you were helping the staff." "I enjoy baking," I replied evenly, "and Martha's been kind enough to share her expertise." "Well, I'm sure that's nice." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "I wanted to let you know that we have dinner reservations tonight at Le Bernardin, 7:30. "That sounds lovely," I said, though inwardly I was dreading another evening of strained conversation and subtle exclusion. Thomas hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "Actually, it's just for the 6 of us adults. Emma will be staying with a friend from school. The restaurant is very exclusive, not really suitable for children." It took me a moment to process his words. 6 adults: Thomas, Megan, Richard, Eleanor, and Who else? Thomas's business partner and his wife will be joining us, Martha murmured quietly after he left. So I'm not invited, I stated flatly. Martha's expression was answer enough. I set down the piping bag I'd been using, feeling a familiar hollow sensation in my chest. Not even included in a family dinner out. How much clearer could it be that I didn't belong in Megan's carefully curated life? I'm sorry, Peggy, Martha said gently. For what it's worth, I think they're making a mistake. You're worth 10 of those society types they're so eager to impress. I managed a smile, though it felt brittle. Thank you, Martha. I appreciate your kindness more than I can say. When the family returned home that afternoon, I was sitting in the garden reading a book I'd found in the guest room. Emma immediately ran to join me, full of stories about her swimming lesson and excited about her party the next day. Megan, her hair freshly styled and nails perfectly manicured, approached with a slightly apologetic expression. Mom, about dinner tonight, she began. Thomas explained. I interrupted, saving her the discomfort of having to exclude me directly. It's fine, I'll have a quiet evening here. Relief flashed across her face. It's just that the Hendersons are very important clients of Thomas's, and the reservation was so hard to get. Really, Megan, you don't need to explain, I said firmly. I'm perfectly capable of entertaining myself for an evening. She nodded, looking both relieved and slightly uncomfortable with my easy acquiescence. Emma, come get ready for your play date, she called. Caroline's mother will be here any minute. Emma gave me a quick hug before running after her mother. Can we talk more tomorrow, Grandma Peggy? Before my party? I'd like that very much, I assured her. Left alone in the garden, I found myself wondering what Edward would make of all this. He had always been Megan's champion, even when her materialistic tendencies emerged in adolescence. She'll find her way, he'd insist. Our values are in there somewhere. I wasn't so sure anymore. The Megan I'd observed over the past days seemed to have fully embraced the Parker family's emphasis on wealth status and appearances, to the exclusion of the warmth and authenticity Edward and I had tried to foster. That evening I watched from my attic window as the family departed for their exclusive dinner, all dressed in expensive evening wear. Megan looked beautiful but tense in a black cocktail dress, checking her appearance repeatedly in the car window's reflection. Once they were gone, the house fell into a welcome silence. I made myself a simple sandwich from the ingredients Martha had left for me and took it to the garden, enjoying the cooler evening air and the distant sounds of the city. As I sat there, I pulled out my lottery ticket, studying the numbers that would soon transform my financial situation so dramatically. The claiming process was already in motion. My lawyer in Portland had submitted the initial paperwork, and I was scheduled to meet with lottery officials the day after I returned to Maine. Within a week, everyone would know that unassuming nurse Peggy Anderson was now one of Maine's wealthiest residents. The thought brought less excitement than it once had. What good was money if the people you wanted to share it with had already decided you weren't worth their time? But then I thought of Emma. Bright, curious Emma who seemed caught between two worlds. Perhaps my newfound wealth could offer her opportunities that combined the best of both the education and experiences that money could buy, paired with the values and genuine connections that it couldn't. Lost in thought. I didn't notice I wasn't alone until a voice spoke behind me. Penny, for your thoughts. I turned to find Martha standing there, a cup of tea in her hands. I thought you'd gone home, I said quickly, tucking the lottery ticket back into my pocket. Forgot my reading glasses, she explained, sitting beside me on the bench. Everything all right? You looked a million miles away. Just thinking about life's unexpected turns, I said vaguely. Martha nodded sagely. I've seen my share of those, good and bad. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk. You know, Martha said eventually, I've worked for a lot of wealthy families over the years. Seen a lot of unhappy people in beautiful houses. Megan seems unhappy to you, I asked, though I'd had the same impression. Martha chose her words carefully. Mrs. Wilson works very hard to maintain the life she thinks she wants, but I've never seen her truly relaxed or joyful, except occasionally with Emma when the Parkers aren't around. The observation stung with its accuracy. The glimpses I'd caught of the old Megan had all been when her in-laws were elsewhere. And Thomas, Martha shrugged. Mr. Wilson is Mr. Wilson, a product of his upbringing. Not unkind, but not particularly warm either. He treats Mrs. Wilson more like an asset than a partner. It wasn't a flattering assessment, but it matched what I'd observed. Thomas seemed to value Megan primarily for how well she fit into his world and managed their social obligations. They don't argue, Martha continued, but they don't laugh together either. Not the way my Harold and I did for 42 years before his heart gave out. Edward and I were the same, I said softly. Even when times were tough, maybe especially then, we could always find something to laugh about together. Martha patted my hand. That's real wealth, Peggy. The rest is just window dressing. After she left, I remained in the garden until the stars appeared thinking about Martha's words and the choices that had brought my daughter to this beautiful hollow life. Tomorrow was Emma's birthday party. After that, I had just 2 more days before returning to Maine and claiming my lottery winnings. Whatever happened next would depend largely on how those final days unfolded. One thing was becoming increasingly clear, though. Money alone wouldn't bridge the gap between Megan and me. That would require something far more valuable and much harder to come by than $47 million. Emma's birthday dawned bright and clear, a perfect summer day for an outdoor celebration. From my attic window, I could see a flurry of activity in the backyard. Workers were setting up a large tent, arranging tables and chairs, and stringing fairy lights in the trees. A catering van was parked in the driveway, and florists were carrying elaborate arrangements toward the house. I dressed carefully in the one nice outfit I'd brought, a blue linen dress with a matching jacket that I'd purchased specifically for this occasion. It wasn't designer clothing, but it was flattering and appropriate for a daytime party. When I came downstairs, the house was in organized chaos. Staff hurried about with trays and decorations while Megan directed operations from the center of the living room, clipboard in hand and phone at her ear. "No, the cake table goes under the oak tree, not by the pool," she was saying tensely into the phone. "And the photographer needs to be here by 2, not 3. The light is better earlier." She barely acknowledged my presence with a distracted nod when I entered. Eleanor, however, gave me a critical once-over from her position on the sofa. "Interesting choice," she commented, gesturing to my outfit. "Rather casual for such an important occasion." I bit back a retort about what constituted important for a child's birthday party and simply smiled. "I think it will do nicely for an afternoon in the garden." Was her only response before turning back to Megan. "Darling, are you sure about having the children eat outside? Amelia Worthington's daughter had her entire party indoors at the Four Seasons last month. Much more elegant." Megan looked momentarily uncertain. "The weather is perfect, though, and Emma specifically asked for garden games." "Children don't know what's best," Eleanor said dismissively. "That's why they have parents to guide them. But it's your decision, of course." I watched Megan's confidence deflate under her mother-in-law's subtle criticism. It was a pattern I'd observed repeatedly during my stay, Eleanor making suggestions that were really commands, and Megan adjusting her plans to accommodate them. My heart ached for my daughter, still so desperate for approval after all these years. What had happened to the confident, independent girl who had once declared she would become president someday? Emma herself appeared moments later, looking uncomfortable in the frilly pink dress Eleanor had purchased. Her hair had been professionally styled into elaborate curls that seemed at odds with her naturally straight locks. "Grandma Peggy," she exclaimed when she saw me hurrying over for a hug, "do you like my party dress?" "You look lovely," I said diplomatically. "Are you excited about your party?" She shrugged, lowering her voice. "I guess. Most of the kids coming are from my school, but they're not really my friends. Mom invited them because their parents are important." Before I could respond, Thomas entered the room handsome, in summer weight slacks and a polo shirt embroidered with his country club's logo. "There's the birthday girl," he announced, giving Emma an affectionate but careful pat on the head, mindful of her styled hair. "Ready for your big day?" "Yes, Daddy," Emma replied dutifully. "I have something special for you." Thomas continued, pulling a small jewelry box from his pocket. A little pre-party gift. Emma opened the box to reveal a delicate gold bracelet with a small diamond charm. "It's pretty," she said, though without the enthusiasm one might expect. "Only the best for my princess," Thomas declared. "Now you'll look perfect for the photographer." I thought of the gift I'd brought for Emma, a handmade quilt I'd spent months working on, incorporating fabrics from significant family events, including a piece of Edward's favorite shirt and a scrap from Megan's childhood bedroom curtains. It was currently wrapped and hidden in my suitcase, suddenly seeming woefully inadequate compared to diamonds and designer dresses. As if reading my thoughts, Megan glanced at me. "Did you bring something for Emma, Mom? We can add it to the gift table if you like." "I did." I nodded. "But I'd prefer to give it to her privately, if that's all right." Megan looked relieved, and I realized with a pang that she had been worried my gift might embarrass her in front of her wealthy friends and in-laws. "That's probably best," she agreed. "The other children are bringing quite elaborate gifts. Designer things mostly." "Of course," I said quietly, swallowing my hurt. The party began at 3 with luxury cars pulling up the driveway one after another. Children in expensive clothing were escorted by equally well-dressed parents, bearing professionally wrapped packages. Each family was greeted effusively by Megan and Thomas, with the Parkers standing nearby like approving royalty. I positioned myself at the periphery, observing the social dynamics at play. It was clear that this event was as much about impressing the adults as celebrating Emma's birthday. Business cards were discreetly exchanged, and conversations revolved around vacation homes, private schools, and recent acquisitions. Emma moved through her party like a small diplomat, thanking guests politely and participating in the organized activities. But I noticed she rarely smiled genuinely. When she thought no one was watching, her expression would fall into one of resigned tolerance rather than joy. During a lull in the festivities, she managed to slip away from the main group and join me at my isolated table. "Are you having fun, sweetheart?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "It's okay," she said with a shrug. "The magician was cool, but I don't really know most of these kids. They're in my grade, but we don't hang out." "Who are your real friends?" I asked gently. Emma's face brightened. "Lizzie from Science Club and Daniel, who lives down the street. But Mom said they wouldn't fit in with this crowd." She lowered her voice. "Daniel's dad is a plumber, and Lizzie's mom teaches at a public school." I felt a surge of disappointment in Megan. Had she truly become so elitist that she would prevent her daughter from inviting her actual friends to her birthday party? "Well, I hope you still get to see them sometimes," I said. Emma nodded. "On Science Club days, Mom doesn't know I joined because it meets during my piano lesson time. I told the piano teacher I needed to use the bathroom and just never came back." She looked momentarily guilty. "That's bad, right?" "Lying." "It's not ideal," I acknowledged, "but sometimes we make choices based on what's important to us. Is Science Club important to you?" "It's the best part of my week," she said earnestly. "We're studying marine biology right now. That's why I want to go to the summer science program instead of the country club camp." Our conversation was interrupted by Megan calling Emma back for the cake cutting. I watched as she was positioned carefully in front of an elaborate three-tiered confection adorned with edible gold leaf. The photographer directed everyone into place. Emma in the center, flanked by her parents with the Parkers prominently positioned beside them. No one invited me to join the family photos. After the cake was served, it was time for presents. I watched as Emma opened package after package of expensive items, designer clothing, electronic gadgets, jewelry, each one met with appropriate enthusiasm from the adults, though Emma's own excitement seemed muted. When the party finally began to wind down, around 6 guests departed with expensive goodie bags and professional photos taken earlier in the day. Emma looked exhausted, her perfect curls beginning to droop in the evening humidity. As the last guests left, she sought me out again. "Grandma Peggy, you said you had a present for me." "I do, sweetheart. It's in my room. Would you like to come up and see it?" She nodded eagerly, and we slipped away while Megan was busy thanking the caterers and the Parkers were enjoying cocktails on the terrace. In my attic room, I retrieved the carefully wrapped package from my suitcase. "This is something special," I told her as she sat beside me on the cot. "I made it myself." Emma unwrapped the quilt with careful fingers, spreading it across her lap. Her eyes widened as she examined the intricate patchwork and the small embroidered labels next to certain squares, explaining their significance. "This was from your mother's favorite childhood dress," I explained, pointing to a square of faded yellow cotton. "And this was your grandfather's shirt that he wore to every science fair. This piece came from the curtains in your mother's bedroom when she was your age." "You made this?" Emma asked, clearly impressed. "With your own hands? Every stitch?" I confirmed. "Your grandfather taught me to quilt when we were first married. He said a handmade quilt was like a family history you could wrap yourself in." Emma ran her fingers over the varied textures, lingering on a square of soft flannel. "It's the most special thing I've ever gotten," she said softly. "Thank you, Grandma Peggy." Her sincere appreciation brought tears to my eyes. "You're welcome, sweetheart. I'm sorry I haven't been more present in your life. That wasn't my choice." Emma looked up at me with wise eyes. "Mom doesn't talk about when she was little, or about you and Grandpa Edward. It's like her life started when she met Dad." The observation was painfully accurate. "Your mother wanted different things than what your grandfather and I could provide," I said carefully. "Sometimes people feel they need to leave their past behind to become who they want to be." "But doesn't that make them forget who they really are?" Emma asked with surprising insight. Before I could answer, footsteps sounded on the stairs and Megan appeared in the doorway, her expression tightening when she saw the quilt spread across Emma's lap. "There you are," she said tensely. "Everyone's looking for you, Emma. Grandmother and Grandfather Parker have another gift for you downstairs." Emma clutched the quilt protectively. "Look what Grandma Peggy made for me, Mom. It has pieces of your old clothes in it and Grandpa Edward's shirt." Megan's gaze flicked over the quilt, a complex emotion crossing her face. Recognition, nostalgia, and what looked like embarrassment. "That's thoughtful," she said stiffly. "But you should come downstairs now. It's rude to keep everyone waiting." "Can I bring my quilt to show them?" Emma asked hopefully. "No," Megan said quickly. "It might get dirty. Leave it here for now." As Emma reluctantly folded the quilt and placed it on my cot, I caught a fleeting expression on Megan's face as she looked at a square of fabric from her childhood bedroom, a momentary softening, a hint of the girl she had been. But the moment passed, and her corporate event planner persona slipped back into place. "Come along now, Emma, and remember your manners with Grandmother Parker. She went to a lot of trouble to find you the perfect gift." As they left, I remained sitting on the cot, running my fingers over the quilt that contained so many memories. Memories Megan seemed determined to forget or hide. Yet that brief flicker of recognition gave me hope. Perhaps somewhere beneath the carefully constructed facade, my daughter still remembered where she came from. Perhaps she still carried some of the values Edward and I had tried to instill. Whether those values could survive in the rarefied air of her current life remained to be seen. The evening after Emma's party, a strange tension settled over the household. The Parkers retired early, claiming exhaustion from the day's festivities. Thomas sequestered himself in his study with a bottle of scotch, while Megan supervised the final cleanup operations with tight-lipped efficiency. Emma had been sent to bed immediately after opening the Parkers' final gift, an extravagant dollhouse that she had thanked them for politely, but without genuine enthusiasm. I noticed she had managed to smuggle my quilt to her room, carrying it hidden under a pile of birthday presents. I was sitting in the garden enjoying the relative coolness of the evening air when Megan unexpectedly joined me. She looked tired beneath her perfect makeup, the strain of maintaining appearances throughout the day evident in the tightness around her eyes. The party was lovely. I offered, seeking neutral ground, to begin a conversation. "It went well enough," she replied, sinking onto the bench beside me. "The Hendersons seemed impressed, which is important for Thomas's business relationship with them." "And was Emma happy?" I asked gently. Megan glanced at me sharply. "Of course. What child wouldn't be happy with a party like that?" She mentioned she would have liked to invite some of her friends from Science Club. Megan's expression hardened. Emma needs to socialize with children from appropriate families. The Science Club is just a phase. Mother Parker has already arranged for additional etiquette and dance lessons next year, which will help her develop more suitable interests. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Megan, do you remember how much you loved your science projects when you were Emma's age? How you and your father would spend hours working on experiments in the kitchen?" A flicker of something nostalgia regret crossed Megan's face before she composed herself. "That was different. Times have changed. Emma has opportunities I never had, and I want to make sure she takes advantage of them." By denying her the chance to pursue her own interests, Megan stood abruptly. "You don't understand this world, Mom. You never have. There are expectation standards that have to be met. Emma will thank me later when she has the right connections and opportunities." "Like you thank me now?" I asked quietly. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. Megan's face flushed. "That's not fair," she said tightly. "I've worked hard to create this life, to give Emma advantages I never had." "You had advantages too, Megan. They just weren't material ones. You had two parents who loved you unconditionally, who supported your dreams, whatever they were, who taught you that character matters more than possessions." "And where did that get me?" Megan retorted. "A small house in a small town with no prospects. Living paycheck to paycheck. I wanted more than that." "And now you have more," I acknowledged. "But are you happy? Megan truly happy?" She looked away out over the manicured garden with its perfect roses and sculpted hedges. For a moment, I thought she might actually answer honestly, but then her shoulders straightened and her social mask slipped back into place. "I have everything I ever wanted," she said firmly. "A beautiful home, a successful husband, a daughter with every advantage. Mother and Father Parker have shown me how to navigate this world, how to ensure Emma's future success. At the cost of her childhood joy, of her authentic interests and friendships." Megan's expression hardened. "I don't expect you to understand. You've never aspired to anything beyond Camden." The dismissal stung, but I pushed past it. I aspired to raise a daughter who valued herself for who she was, not for what she owned or who she knew. A daughter who treated people with kindness and respect regardless of their social standing. "Like you're treating Thomas and the Parkers," Megan countered. "You've been judging them since you arrived." "I've been observing," I corrected gently. "And what I've seen is a household where appearances matter more than authenticity, where a child's genuine interests are discouraged in favor of appropriate ones, where I, your mother, am housed in a dusty attic, while your in-laws enjoy luxury guest suites. Megan had the grace to look momentarily ashamed about the sleeping arrangements. The guest rooms were already promised to Thomas's parents, she said weakly. They expect certain standards. And I don't, is that it, Megan? Because I've lived modestly, I don't deserve basic consideration. That's not what I meant, she protested. Then what did you mean? I pressed. Help me understand why my own daughter treats me like an embarrassing secret to be hidden away. Megan's carefully constructed composure began to crack. You don't fit here, Mom, she burst out. You don't understand how things work in this world. Every time you speak about Camden or your nursing job or coupons or homemade gifts, I see the way they look at you, the way they look at me. Like we're less. And that bothers you so much, that your mother worked hard all her life in a helping profession, that she lives within her means, in a community she loves. You don't understand the pressure, Megan said, her voice rising. The constant scrutiny. Do you know what Eleanor said when she heard you were coming to visit? She said, "Oh dear, will we need to hide the good silver?" Like you're some kind of thief or con artist just because you're not wealthy. The casual cruelty of the comment took my breath away. And you defended me, of course, I asked, already knowing the answer from Megan's averted eyes. It was a joke, she muttered unconvincingly. A joke at your mother's expense. And you laughed along, didn't you, to fit in, to be accepted? Megan's silence was confirmation enough. I stood suddenly feeling every one of my 62 years. I think I'll turn in now. It's been a long day. Mom, Megan began, but I held up a hand to stop her. It's all right, Megan. I understand more than you think. I understand that somewhere along the way, you decided that what you came from wasn't good enough, that who you were, who we raised you to be, wasn't enough. And that breaks my heart, but it doesn't change how much I love you. I left her standing in the garden, her perfectly made-up face a mask of conflicting emotions. As I climbed the stairs to my attic room, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and resolution. Tomorrow was my last full day in Boston. The day after, I would return to Maine and claim my lottery winnings. The money wouldn't solve the deeper problems between Megan and me, but perhaps it would at least force her to reconsider her assumptions about worth and value. For now, though, I would sleep in my hot, dusty attic, secure in the knowledge that true wealth had very little to do with bank balances or social status. And maybe, just maybe, that was a lesson Megan might finally be ready to learn.